Before a war is won on the battlefield, it is won in the mind. And right now, Iran is winning the information war in a way that is shaking Israel's political foundation from the inside, without needing a single additional missile to do it. Here is what actually happened, laid out precisely, so you understand exactly why the whole world started asking a single question this past week. Where is Benjamin Netanyahu? On March 2nd, day 3 of this war, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a formal military statement. They announced that their Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles, the same weapon system that had already successfully struck targets across multiple countries in the region, had been fired at 2 specific addresses in Israel. The first was the official office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The second was the home of the Israeli Air Force commander Tomer Bar. The IRGC statement said both strikes were targeted, precision operations. It said the strikes were a surprise, and then it added a phrase that traveled around the world at the speed of social media. Netanyahu's fate, the statement said, was unclear. Israel's Prime Minister's office responded the same day. They called the IRGC's claims fake news. The statement was brief, categorical, and contained no visual proof, no press conference, no video of Netanyahu speaking from a specific location. Just words on a page saying the claims are false. In normal times, that would have ended the story. These are not normal times. Israel has operating under strict wartime media restrictions since February 28th. International press cannot freely access strike zones. Damage to Israeli military infrastructure and leadership locations is legally suppressed from publication. Israeli media is prohibited from reporting on IDF casualties or facility damage without official clearance. The government controls almost everything the public sees about what is happening inside Israel's borders. The result is a vacuum. And in a vacuum, every unanswered question becomes its own kind of answer. For the 4 to 5 days that followed the IRGC's strike claim, Netanyahu did not appear on live video. He did not hold a press conference. He did not post to social media. Israeli media reported that he visited the Beit Shemesh missile shelter site on March 6th, the site where 9 people were killed inside a bomb shelter, and his office published a written statement on March 7th. But the absence of sustained, verifiable, time-stamped public appearances across those critical early days kept the speculation alive globally. Then came the development that changed the calculation again. Today, March 10th, Trump's 2 most senior Middle East envoys, Special Representative Steve Witkoff and Presidential Advisor Jared Kushner, were scheduled to fly to Israel for direct meetings with Netanyahu. These were not routine diplomatic visits. Witkoff has been Trump's primary back channel across every major regional negotiation: Gaza ceasefires, hostage releases, the indirect Iran talks in Oman and Geneva before the war began. Kushner helped architect the Abraham Accords. Both men have visited Israel during active conflicts before. Neither canceled until now. Channel 12, Israel broke the story. The Jerusalem Post confirmed it from separate sources. Both Witkoff and Kushner called off the trip. No official reason was provided. No rescheduled date was announced. The timing made the cancellation land harder than it otherwise would have. 4 days earlier, the Jerusalem Post had already reported a significant fracture between Washington and Tel Aviv, the first confirmed public disagreement between the 2 governments since the war began. U.S. officials told the Post they were caught off guard by the scale of Israeli strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure. Israel had warned the U.S. that oil facilities would be targeted. What Israel did not disclose was how extensive the strikes would be. When oil prices crossed $120 per barrel last week, Washington was as surprised as global markets. American officials were angry. Israeli officials were defiant. And now the 2 men Trump sent to manage that relationship, Witkoff and Kushner, are not on a plane to Tel Aviv. What you're watching is not simply a mystery about one man's location. What you are watching is a war within the war, a fracture forming between the 2 governments that launched this operation together 11 days ago. And that fracture is being exploited, deliberately and skillfully, by every actor in this conflict who benefits from keeping the United States and Israel off balance with each other. Iran knows that if the 2 partners who started this war together begin pulling in different directions, the entire operational architecture of Operation Epic Fury begins to come apart. Not from the outside, from the inside. The Kheibar Shekan missile strike on Netanyahu's office may or may not have caused physical damage. What it definitely caused was something harder to repair. A week of global uncertainty, a canceled diplomatic visit, and a question that every world leader is now quietly asking each other in private. Who is actually in charge over there? And are they still together? To understand what is really happening between Washington and Tel Aviv right now, you need to understand what each side wanted from this war, and how those goals have quietly become incompatible. America's stated objectives when Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28th were specific and limited: destroy Iran's nuclear program permanently, degrade its missile infrastructure, and create the conditions for regime change by removing the supreme leader. The plan, as intelligence officials later described it to The Intercept, assumed that once Khamenei was killed, the Iranian population would rise up, the government would collapse, and a new Iran would emerge, one that no longer posed a nuclear threat to the region. That plan failed completely. Mojtaba Khamenei was named the new supreme leader. Iran's security apparatus held together. The population did not rise up to overthrow the government. And the war, instead of ending in days the way American planners had modeled, has now consumed 11 days, $891 million per day, and shows no sign of military resolution. In that environment, America's priority has shifted from victory to exit. Washington needs a face-saving off-ramp. It needs a ceasefire formula, a defined endpoint it can call a success, and a way to get oil prices down before the American domestic economy tips into the recession that every financial analyst is now modeling. That is why Witkoff was going to Israel. That is why Trump told the Times of Israel that the decision on when to end the war would be made with Netanyahu's input, while privately making clear he would decide at the right time, meaning when he needs to politically, regardless of what Israel wants. Israel's priority is completely different. Netanyahu's government went into this war with a target list that extended far beyond nuclear facilities. Israel wants Iran's missile manufacturing capacity eliminated. It wants the IRGC's leadership structure broken. And it has been striking Iranian oil infrastructure, a category of targets that America did not approve at the scale Israel chose to execute them. That is the specific flashpoint the Jerusalem Post reported. Israel told the U.S. oil facilities would be hit. Israel did not tell the U.S. the strikes would push global oil above $120 per barrel and trigger cascading economic damage that is now politically radioactive in the United States. Washington's anger is real. Witkoff and Kushner's cancellation reflects it. And here is where Iran's strategy becomes visible. Iran has not been fighting this war blindly. It has been reading the relationship between its two adversaries and systematically applying pressure to the points where that relationship is most fragile. When Iran struck Israeli civilian infrastructure, the hotel in Palm Jumeirah, the airport approaches, the bomb shelter in Beit Shemesh, it was applying pressure to America's ability to defend the moral case for the war internationally. When Iran struck American bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, repeatedly, consistently, with growing accuracy using Russian intelligence, it was applying pressure to America's domestic tolerance for military casualties. When Iran's IRGC made its statement about Netanyahu's office and declared his fate unclear, it was applying pressure to the global narrative that Israel is still fully in control of this operation. Every one of those pressure points has produced a measurable result. Internationally, Human Rights Watch opened a war crimes investigation. The school strike that killed over 170 children has made it legally and diplomatically impossible for most of the world to stand alongside this war publicly. The Gulf states, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, have all refused to join the offensive. The UAE has officially stated its territory will not be used for attacks on Iran. UK Prime Minister Starmer denied Trump's request to use British bases as launch platforms for strikes. France sent its carrier toward the Mediterranean, but has kept its participation strictly limited. Russia, meanwhile, is confirming exactly what its strategic analysts predicted when the war began. Every day this conflict continues, Moscow benefits. Europe is not receiving Russian gas. Europe is not receiving Gulf LNG either. Qatar declared force majeure. Ras Laffan is offline. Europe is sitting in an energy crisis, watching global oil prices surge toward the $150 mark that Qatar's energy minister publicly warned is possible. And suddenly Russia, which has been selling its energy to India and China throughout the last 2 years of sanctions, looks like the only stable supplier on the continent. Russia's foreign minister has already summoned Gulf ambassadors and delivered a direct message. Condemn the strikes on Iranian civilian infrastructure, apply pressure to end the war, and do not allow yourselves to be dragged into a conflict that benefits only Washington and Tel Aviv. The Gulf states did not push back. They listened. And now these same Gulf states, which host every major American military installation in the region, the basis from which Operation Epic Fury is being sustained, are making quiet calculations about their long-term security architecture. An architecture that, after 11 days of watching American military power fail to close the Strait of Hormuz or stop a single wave of Iranian drone attacks, is looking increasingly like it might need to be rebuilt around a different partner. The fracture between America and Israel is not a sideshow to this war. It is the war's most dangerous front. Let's finish where the consequences are most irreversible. The question of Netanyahu's whereabouts, wherever he is, whatever condition he is in, is a single data point. It matters. But the larger story it is pointing toward is what matters most. And that larger story is about what happens when a war's two architects stop trusting each other 11 days in, with no exit in sight, and every ally watching from a distance. Israel has a specific fear that its officials are now communicating to American counterparts privately. It is not a fear about Iran's missiles. Israel has lived under missile threats for its entire existence. The fear is about what happens to Israel if the Gulf states, at some point during this war's continuation, formally ask the United States to leave. This is not a theoretical scenario. It is the logical endpoint of a trajectory that is already clearly visible. Qatar has said it will not allow its territory to be used for offensive action against Iran. The UAE made the same declaration. Both countries are still hosting American forces because those forces have been providing defensive interceptions of Iranian missiles. But those same governments are absorbing economic damage on a scale that is becoming politically unsustainable domestically. Kuwait lost oil field production. Qatar's LNG exports remain halted. Bahrain's refinery is offline. Every day of this war costs Gulf economies billions of dollars and exposes their civilian populations to missile attacks they were told would stop but haven't. At some point, those governments have to ask themselves, is America's presence here protecting us, or has America's presence here made us targets? If the answer tips toward the second option, if one Gulf government decides publicly that the cost of hosting American forces now exceeds the benefit of American protection, the entire U.S. operational structure in the region collapses. The air power that has launched thousands of strikes on Iran in 11 days, the logistics chains, the intelligence sharing, the carrier strike groups relying on Gulf port access. All of it depends on the consent of governments that are being hit daily by Iranian missiles, precisely because they are hosting American forces. Israel understands this, which is why Israel's message to Washington, according to multiple media reports this week, is urgent. Do something, anything, to change the trajectory. Because if the Gulf exits this arrangement, we are alone. And America's answer, reflected in Witkoff and Kushner's canceled flight, appears to be, we are trying, but we cannot try from Israel right now because we are not on the same page as you. Meanwhile, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the man who lost his father, his mother, his wife, his sister, his daughter, and his niece to American and Israeli strikes 11 days ago, has now led Iran through a week of its own leadership transition, while still sustaining daily missile and drone operations across the region. Whatever personal losses he has absorbed, operationally, Iran has not missed a day. The IRGC has stated its fighting capacity extends to 6 months minimum. Its commanders have spoken publicly about readiness reserves that go beyond that. Iran has been preparing for exactly this war for 4 decades. Its missile force operates through a network of autonomous regional commands that the U.S. has not managed to disable. Its drone pipeline, supplied by Chinese components, has not been interrupted. Its intelligence has been augmented by Russian satellite and signals data that has enabled it to locate and strike American personnel with a precision that exceeded Washington's projections. And critically, Iran's offer for a limited ceasefire has never included Israel. From the beginning, Tehran's public position has been, if Gulf states stop allowing their territory to be used for attacks on Iran, Iran will stop hitting Gulf states. It will not stop hitting Israel. It will not stop hitting American forces, as long as American forces are actively striking Iran. That gap between what Iran will accept and what America and Israel need is the gap that Witkoff and Kushner were supposed to go to Israel to discuss. The fact that the discussion is not happening today, here, in person, between the closest allies in this war, is the clearest signal yet that no one in this conflict actually knows how it ends. The doomsday plane is in the air. The Gulf states are stepping back. Russia is collecting the economic dividends of a war it didn't start. China is supplying the adversary. And the two governments that launched Operation Epic Fury together 11 days ago are today not in the same room. Netanyahu is alive. His office confirmed it. His appearances confirmed it. But the alliance that put his country's Air Force and America's B-2 bombers in the sky together on February 28th, the alliance that was supposed to be the unbreakable axis of this war, is showing its first cracks. And in wars like this one, the first cracks are always the most important ones, because they never stay small.